My name is Emily Carter, I'm 34, and 3 months ago, my whole life flipped the moment I walked into work and saw a fake video of me doing something I never did. Someone I trusted wanted to destroy everything I'd built. And for a while they succeeded. But I got my truth back inch by inch. Tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories about revenge, family drama, and emotional courage. I still remember the exact sound the office door made when I pushed it open that morning. It wasn't loud or unusual, but something about it felt heavier, almost warning me that the day ahead wouldn't be like any other. I didn't take the hint. I walked in like I always did, coffee in one hand, bag on my shoulder, mentally preparing for a long Tuesday of back-to-back meetings. My name badge bumped lightly against my chest as I crossed the lobby, but instead of the usual cheerful chatter from my coworkers, I stepped into a silence so strange it made me stop mid-step. People were looking at me. Not openly, more like quick glances and then fast looks away, the kind of behavior you notice only when something is very wrong. I forced a small smile at Sandra from accounting, hoping she'd greet me like she always did. She avoided my eyes and pretended to type faster. That was the first cut of the day, small, sharp, unexpected. I kept walking, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe everyone was stressed. Maybe a deadline was coming up. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But then I reached my desk. And that's when I knew something was off. My computer was already awake. I never left it unlocked, not even for a few minutes. The monitor glowed with an open email, and the subject line alone made my stomach tighten. HR meeting urgent. I hadn't even taken off my coat. Before I could click anything, my manager, Brian, appeared beside my desk with a look I'd never seen on him. Tight-lipped, uncomfortable, almost guilty. He didn't say good morning. He didn't ask how I was. He just said, "Emily, we need to talk. Now." My heart jumped. I followed him down the hallway, my legs heavier with every step. The conference room door was already closed, which felt strange. Normally, it stayed open unless something serious was happening. When he opened it, I saw two people sitting inside. HR Director Melissa, and a laptop facing the middle of the table, positioned like someone was about to give a presentation. I didn't sit yet. I didn't want to. My hands were already sweating. Melissa took a slow breath, folded her hands and said, "Emily, we have received a complaint involving a video. We need you to watch it." I thought she meant a project video. Maybe something with a client. Maybe a misunderstanding. But the look on Brian's face said otherwise. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. I finally sat down. Melissa pressed play. And then my world cracked. On the screen I appeared, my face, my voice, my clothes, standing inside a conference room I recognized, speaking in a harsh, disrespectful tone about a client we'd been working with for months. In the video I sounded arrogant, rude, and careless. I watched myself say things I would never say, not even on my worst day. I felt cold, then hot, then numb. That's not real," I whispered, barely able to hear my own voice. I didn't say any of that. No one responded right away. That silence hurt more than the video. Brian cleared his throat. "Emily, it looks very real." I shook my head, my voice trembling. "It's fake. I swear to you it's fake. You know me, Brian. I've worked here 6 years. I would never talk like that." He didn't meet my eyes. Melissa clicked pause. The frozen frame of my face stared back at me. The lighting looked perfect, the expressions were seamless, and the voice matched mine so closely it made me want to scream. "It appears authentic," she said carefully. "We received it anonymously last night." Anonymous? Of course. Cowards love hiding behind shadows. "But Melissa, I didn't do this," I repeated, feeling my throat tighten. "I wasn't even in that room yesterday." She nodded, but it was the kind of nod people use when they're already unsure of you. "We're beginning a full review. Until then, we need your cooperation. We will speak with the involved client as well." My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. "Are you suspending me?" Brian jumped in. "No. Not yet. But we need you to step back from client communication until we sort this out." Step back. That phrase can ruin a career faster than anything else. I felt tears pricking my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to break in front of people who already looked at me differently. When the meeting ended, I walked out like someone moving in slow motion. My legs felt weak, and a strange ringing filled my ears. People looked at me again, quick glances, whispers, hushed tones. No one asked if I was okay. No one stopped me. As I reached my desk, I noticed a sticky note on my keyboard. No words, just a small drawn circle scribbled quickly. First, it didn't mean anything. But the longer I stared, the more it bothered me. Someone had been there. Someone had touched my space. Someone had left me a message without using any words. I sat down and tried to breathe, but every breath felt sharp. I opened my inbox. Dozens of unread messages. A few colleagues had withdrawn themselves from projects we were working on together. Someone copied my manager on a thread they normally would have sent directly to me. My work life was shifting in real time, as if people had received instructions overnight. For the first time in years, I felt unsafe in a place I once trusted. I tried working, hoping routine would calm me, but my hands shook too much. I kept replaying the video scene in my mind, over and over, trying to pinpoint the moment where it looked unreal, but everything looked too perfect. Too intentional. A tiny detail suddenly hit me. In the video, the digital clock on the wall read 7:42 p.m. But yesterday at 7:42 p.m., I wasn't in the office. I was at home on the couch, eating leftover pasta and watching a baking show. Alone, yes, but absolutely not in the building. That realization didn't fix anything, but it reminded me that I wasn't losing my mind. Late in the morning, Brian stopped by my desk. He leaned on the divider, keeping his voice low. "Emily, until this is resolved, maybe keep interactions light today. Some people are uneasy. Uneasy. About me." A person who had never raised their voice or missed a deadline. I nodded even though I wanted to scream. "Brian, do you believe I did this?" He hesitated. That hesitation broke something inside me. "I don't know what to believe yet," he said before walking away. I didn't work much after that. I mostly sat there trying not to cry, feeling completely exposed. Every time someone walked by, I wondered if they'd seen the video. If they thought the me in the video was the real me. By noon I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my bag and walked out. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face so sharply it made my eyes water instantly. I kept walking, not caring where I was headed, just needing distance from the building that suddenly felt like enemy territory. I ended up in my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I stared straight ahead, watching people walk by, completely unaware of the storm swallowing my life whole. I whispered to myself, who would hate me enough to do this? I didn't know the answer, but someone did this. Someone wanted me gone. Someone had planned this carefully. And in that lonely parking lot, I felt the first spark of something other than fear. Determination. I stayed in my car longer than I meant to. The heater hummed softly, but the air still felt cold and tight, like the whole world had shrunk to a small box I couldn't quite push my way out of. My phone buzzed twice, once with a calendar reminder, and once with a message from my mom asking about weekend plans, but I didn't answer either one. My mind was locked on one thought. Someone inside that building wanted me gone, and they weren't afraid to hide behind shadows to make it happen. After a few minutes, I forced myself to inhale deeply, grabbed my bag and stepped out of the car. My legs still felt shaky, but that small spark of determination from earlier had grown into something steadier. If someone wanted to push me out, I wasn't going to make it easy for them. I walked back toward the building, pushing against the knot of nerves tightening in my stomach. The door clicked behind me as I re-entered the office. The atmosphere felt even heavier than before, like the walls had absorbed the tension from my morning meeting. People still avoided my gaze, but now there was something else. An alertness, a quiet watchfulness, as if everyone was waiting for me to do something wrong. I headed straight to my desk, deciding I would work quietly and stay out of everyone's way. But before I could sit down, I noticed a small group gathered near the copier. They weren't whispering this time. They were speaking softly, but not softly enough. "I just don't get why someone would talk like that," one of them said. "I mean, it's her voice," another added. "It has to be real." The words pricked my skin like needles. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but it was impossible not to hear when the conversation was about me. I took a slow breath, turned toward them, and said in the most even tone I could manage, "If you have questions about me, you can ask me directly." All three froze. The youngest one, Kevin, a new intern who still wore his badge on a lanyard like a student, Looked guilty enough that I almost felt bad for him. Almost. "Oh, Emily," he said quickly. We were just." "It's okay," I said, even though it wasn't. "Just, if you hear anything, maybe check with me first." They nodded awkwardly and slowly dispersed, leaving me standing alone with that sinking feeling again. I sat at my desk trying to drown myself in work. But it was impossible to ignore the tension in the room. Every time someone walked past me, I felt them looking at me from the corners of their eyes. I opened my laptop, hoping emails would distract me, but instead found something new. A calendar notification for a mandatory HR follow-up meeting at 3:30 p.m. No explanation. Just a time and a room number. A tightness formed in my chest. They weren't wasting any time. And they weren't giving me much breathing room either. I pushed the thought aside and focused on work. But every time I tried to dive into a task, my mind drifted back to the video. The lighting. The background. The clock. The tone of my voice. It was all too precise, almost eerie in how real it looked. At one point, my coworker Beth, someone I'd always considered friendly, stopped by my desk. I expected her to offer a sympathetic smile or at least a polite greeting. Instead, she stayed a good 2 feet away, arms crossed, her voice low. "Emily, I know this is a rough day," she said. "But maybe try to keep things calm. There's a lot of tension right now." I blinked. "I'm not doing anything." "I know," she said, but her tone didn't match the words. It was the tone people use when they're trying not to get involved. "Just be careful." Careful. A word that suddenly carried so much weight. After she walked away, I stared at my computer screen again, feeling smaller than I had all morning. It was incredible how fast trust evaporated when doubt crept in, even among people who knew me for years. By noon, hunger hit me, but I didn't want to go to the break room. The thought of running into coworkers who were whispering earlier made my stomach twist. I stayed at my desk and ate the granola bar I kept in my drawer. It tasted like cardboard, but I didn't care. The office lights seemed brighter than usual, almost glaring. Every sound, keyboards clicking, chairs rolling, phones ringing, felt sharper, more intense. It was like my senses were dialed up to some uncomfortable level. The quiet war had already begun, and I was the only one fighting it. Around 12:45, something unexpected happened. Someone tapped lightly on my desk. I looked up and found Margaret standing there. She was from the marketing department, older, calm, the type of person who brought homemade cookies during the holidays. She leaned close and spoke in a soft voice. "Emily, can I talk to you for a moment?" Her tone wasn't harsh or judgmental. It was hesitant, concerned. I nodded, relieved to see at least one familiar face. She motioned toward the far corner of the office, near the supply shelves where no one usually went. When we stopped there, she glanced around to make sure no one was watching. It was the first time all day that someone seemed afraid for me instead of afraid of me. "I don't want to get involved," she whispered. "But you should know. Someone printed screenshots from that video and passed them around this morning." My stomach dropped. "Printed? Why would anyone?" "I don't know," she said, shaking her head. "But I saw one on the break room counter before someone whisked it away. And I think it's someone inside our team doing it." My heart pounded. "Did you see who took it?" "No," she said. "They moved quickly. But I heard someone say your name earlier. And it didn't sound like gossip. It sounded planned. Like they wanted people to see that video before HR even brought it up." That small spark of determination in me flared again. "Thank you for telling me." She squeezed my arm gently. "Just be careful. This doesn't feel right." After she left, I leaned against the supply shelf trying to steady myself. Someone wasn't just trying to smear my name. They were spreading the video around like it was a trophy. Someone wanted to shape the narrative before I ever had a chance to defend myself. When I returned to my desk, a new email popped up. This one wasn't from HR or management. It was from a blocked address. Subject: "Thought you should see this." There was no message. Only an attachment. My heart thudded hard as I clicked it. A single image loaded slowly. A still frame from the fake video. My face frozen in mid-sentence, looking angry, accusatory, nothing like the person I knew myself to be. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the mouse. Why send this directly to me? To scare me? To warn me? To taunt me? Before I could overthink it, Another message arrived from the same block sender. More people have seen it than you think. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to slam the laptop shut. This wasn't just a smear anymore. It was psychological. Whoever did this wasn't hiding in a dark corner. They were walking around the office, watching me struggle. I took a slow breath, trying to gather myself. Even through the fear, another thought pushed through. The blocked address meant someone tech-savvy was involved. Someone who knew how to hide things, someone comfortable with systems, someone who understood how to manipulate digital files. But I didn't jump to conclusions. I couldn't. Not yet. Around 2 p.m., I stood to refill my water bottle, hoping a short walk would clear my head. As I passed the hallway near the back offices, I heard two people whispering. She looked shocked. Maybe she didn't think we'd find out. I still say it's too polished. Who makes a video like that unless they mean it? My chest tightened again. Their voices stopped when they noticed me approaching. I kept walking, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing how their words hit me like darts. When I reached the break room, I found another odd thing. A printed document on the table with half the text blacked out. I didn't touch it, but it looked like some kind of internal email. A few lines remained visible, just enough to read words like review, client concern, and internal matter. It felt like people were passing pieces of information around behind my back. Not enough to form a full picture, but enough to create fear and distortion. I headed back to my desk, feeling the tension pulse behind my eyes. At 3:30, my phone buzzed again. A gentle reminder for the HR follow-up meeting. My palms grew damp. I hated that one room had so much power over me now. I walked slowly, trying to keep my breathing steady. The hallway felt narrower than usual, like the walls had moved closer just for me. When I reached the conference room, Melissa was already inside, typing something on her laptop. She looked up with a small, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Emily, thank you for coming." I sat down across from her. "You said you needed more information?" She nodded. "We've spoken to a few people today. We're gathering different perspectives." Her tone was neutral, but the wording stung. Different perspectives. As though truth was a matter of opinion. She asked a series of questions: where I was last night, whether I'd been in the office late, who had access to the conference room. Everything she asked, I answered calmly. I provided exact times, details, even what show I was watching. But I could sense she wasn't convinced one way or the other. When the meeting ended, she thanked me again. And I left feeling drained but strangely more alert. Something about her questions told me that more people had spoken about me than I expected. Maybe too many. I returned to my desk and found another sticky note. This one wasn't blank like the morning's note. It had 2 words written in small, hurried letters. "Watch carefully." That note chilled me more than the video ever did. I looked around the office, scanning the faces nearby. Everyone appeared focused on their screens, but the air felt different, tense, charged, as if another invisible gear had shifted. Something was happening. Someone was pushing this story harder than I realized. And the quiet war inside my office had only just begun. After that night in the office, when I first realized this wasn't just about a video, it became impossible to treat my workspace the same way again. The quiet war had transformed into something more tangible, something I could almost touch. Every glance from a coworker, every sudden pause in conversation, every flicker of a screen made me feel like I was walking through a minefield. I decided to keep my head down, not because I wanted to disappear, but because I needed to observe. I spent the next few days in silent frustration, trying to maintain composure while my brain ran circles around every detail of the office. My fingers flew over the keyboard, not with the usual productivity but with a purpose I hadn't had before. I started paying attention to small digital inconsistencies, things that, on any normal day, would have gone unnoticed. It started with the shared folders. I noticed strange logins at odd hours. Someone had been accessing files late at night, sometimes while the office was empty, sometimes during lunch breaks when I assumed no one would be paying attention. The timestamps didn't match our actual schedule. A file labeled Client Presentation had been opened at 8:17 p.m. on a Thursday, but I had proof I left the office by 6:15 p.m. The folder itself had a trail of edits I didn't make. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. My palms were clammy, and my mind raced with possibilities. Was it a simple mistake? A glitch? Or was someone trying to cover tracks while setting me up? Every instinct in me screamed the latter, and it scared me more than I wanted to admit. Over the next few days, I dove deeper into the digital trail. I reviewed old emails and meeting notes, scanning every line for inconsistencies. My eyes ached from staring at screens for hours, but it was worth it. Each email, each timestamp, each project file told a story. An invisible map someone had left behind without knowing I would be following it. Some of the emails had been edited, some deleted, and others forwarded to people I hadn't even imagined would be involved. A pattern slowly emerged, almost like breadcrumbs scattered in a labyrinth. I realized this wasn't random. Someone had carefully constructed a trail that could easily lead the innocent astray. Except now, I was starting to see it. One afternoon, as I combed through a folder labeled Q2 Reports, my phone buzzed. It was a Slack message from a coworker I barely interacted with. Claire, someone quiet, always hovering on the edges of meetings but never really participating. The message was brief and hesitant. Emily, can we talk? Privately. Just be careful. Don't trust everyone. I stared at the screen, my stomach knotting. Claire was not someone who messaged coworkers about anything personal. The fact that she reached out in this way screamed authenticity. I immediately responded, asking her to meet me in the conference room that was usually empty after 5 p.m. When she arrived, she looked over her shoulder nervously, as if expecting someone to follow. I shouldn't even be talking to you about this, she whispered. But someone is working against you, and it's closer than you think. Not everyone here is who they appear to be. I nodded slowly, trying to digest her words. Do you know who? She shook her head. I can't be sure. But you need to watch your back. Pay attention to details, how people act, what they say, even what they don't say. Something feels off about Jason, though. Just keep an eye. Jason. My heart clenched. I knew the name well. Jason had always been that quiet, friendly type. Always polite. Always helpful. He never raised his voice, never created waves. But now Claire's words planted a seed I couldn't ignore. I returned to my desk with a renewed sense of purpose. Every time Jason walked past, I noticed tiny quirks that hadn't seemed important before. The way he shifted his weight, the way he glanced at my screen and quickly looked away, the subtle tightening of his jaw when he thought I wasn't watching, all small, almost imperceptible signs, but enough to make my instincts flare. The next few days became a careful game. I tracked file access, keeping detailed notes about who logged in and when. I observed Jason more closely, trying to see if his behavior aligned with the patterns I had noticed digitally. Every time he smiled at me or offered help, I wondered, was this genuine, or was it a calculated mask? My heart ached with the realization that someone I trusted, or at least considered harmless, could be the architect of the storm destroying my career. One evening I stayed late, long after most of the office had emptied. The hum of fluorescent lights was the only sound, broken occasionally by the distant clatter of cleaning staff. I opened the server access logs and cross-referenced them with timestamps of the video leak and subsequent internal communications. My fingers moved deliberately, scanning lines of code and file activity. And then I found it. A sequence of actions that didn't make sense. Someone had accessed the conference room folder from Jason's login credentials during the precise hours when the fake video must have been planted. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. This wasn't circumstantial anymore. The digital breadcrumbs led directly to someone inside the office, someone with access, knowledge, and motive. I felt a mixture of relief and rage. Relief because I finally had a direction, a lead. Rage because it meant that betrayal wasn't random. It was calculated, and Jason had been hiding it behind that quiet, friendly demeanor. But even as I pieced the digital trail together, more questions surfaced. Was Jason working alone? Or did he have accomplices? The logs suggested that other accounts had been used to cover tracks. Temporary logins that couldn't be traced easily. My stomach twisted with the realization that this could be bigger than I imagined. The following morning, I noticed subtle changes in Jason's behavior. He lingered near the printer longer than usual, as if he was trying to confirm something. His eyes darted to my desk more frequently. Once, I caught him hovering outside the break room door, pretending to check his phone but clearly monitoring movement. Every small action now read like a paragraph in a book I had finally begun to understand. Meanwhile, I continued combing through old emails, paying attention to the way people spoke and what was left unsaid. Some threads were red herrings, no doubt planted to confuse anyone investigating. Others were revealing in their silence. A forwarded email that had been altered showed that someone had tried to create a false trail, but the inconsistencies were subtle enough that only careful, methodical work would expose them. I documented everything, even the tiniest anomalies, building a timeline that could hold under scrutiny. One evening, I overheard a conversation near the break room between two colleagues I hadn't noticed interacting before. "Did you see what she said to HR?" one whispered. "Yeah, she's onto something. Don't let her see the logs," the other replied. I froze. Logs? My heart skipped a beat. Someone else was actively monitoring the situation, trying to manipulate it from the shadows. But they didn't see me, and they certainly didn't know I was paying attention. That night, I stayed later than usual again, armed with new information. I cross-referenced the office network access logs with internal communication timestamps. Patterns emerged, and one name kept appearing more than any other: Jason. He was in the right places at the right times, accessing files he shouldn't have touched, leaving subtle digital fingerprints that now screamed intentional sabotage. I leaned back in my chair, my body exhausted but my mind sharp. For the first time since the video appeared, I felt a sense of control. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was an investigator. Every log, every subtle detail, every nervous glance from Jason was a piece of a puzzle I was finally assembling. Then came the breakthrough. While reviewing access permissions for the conference room media files, I found a file that shouldn't have existed. A backup copy of the video metadata saved in a restricted folder. The file was timestamped the night the fake video appeared online. And most importantly, the system recorded that it had been accessed from Jason's credentials multiple times during that window. I felt a chill run down my spine. Solid proof. Not just suspicion. Not just digital breadcrumbs pointing vaguely in a direction. This was tangible evidence that Jason, someone I had considered a quiet ally, was intimately involved in the creation and distribution of the fake video. I sat back, staring at the screen, heart hammering. Months of frustration, anxiety, and fear culminated in this moment. Every sleepless night, every whispered suspicion, every quiet pang of doubt that someone in the office was working against me. It all made sense now. I had a path forward. I had a trail, and it led directly to the source. Yet even as relief mixed with triumph, I couldn't ignore the lingering tension. Jason wasn't aware I had discovered this yet. And if he suspected I was onto him, things could get messy. I needed to act carefully, methodically, and strategically. One wrong move could undo all the careful work I had done. I saved all the evidence, documented the timeline meticulously, and even created a separate secure folder with backups. Every detail had to be bulletproof. And as I turned off my computer that night, I realized something profound. This first trail I had followed, the one that led me to the truth, wasn't just about catching a saboteur. It was about reclaiming power in a situation designed to strip me of it. For the first time in weeks, I left the office feeling a spark of hope. The quiet war inside my own office had revealed a path, and I knew exactly who I needed to watch. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be simple. But the first trail was there, blazing like a faint light in the darkness, and I was ready to follow it wherever it led. Sitting at my desk that night, the screen casting a pale glow across my face, I kept replaying the digital evidence over and over in my mind. Jason had left footprints in the files. The timestamps, the server logs, the subtle edits, all of it pointed to him. But evidence alone was only half the battle. Understanding why he did it was just as crucial. Because without motive, confrontation could crumble before it began. I leaned back, letting my head rest against the chair. My thoughts circled the same questions repeatedly. Why would Jason go to such lengths? Why sabotage me so carefully, so deliberately? Was this just office politics? Personal resentment? Or something deeper I hadn't imagined? The first clue came from the most ordinary place, the break room. The next morning, I noticed Jason lingering near the coffee machine. Not drinking coffee, just standing there. His eyes scanned the room nervously, as if waiting for someone or avoiding someone. My instincts told me he wasn't just nervous about being caught. He was worried about exposure of something more personal. I decided I needed to observe him more closely, subtly, without raising suspicion. Over the next few days, I began jotting down notes. Not on paper in the office, but in a private digital journal saved on a secure folder on my laptop. I recorded the way he interacted with others, what projects he seemed to avoid, and the moments he seemed unusually tense. Patterns began to emerge. Jason always became anxious when discussions turned toward client accounts I managed, especially when budgets or deadlines were mentioned. It didn't take long for another clue to surface. While cross-checking old emails for anomalies, I noticed something peculiar. Jason had been copied on internal communications that weren't relevant to his role. Things like project updates, sensitive client complaints, and even confidential promotions. At first, I thought it might be accidental oversight. But the more I looked, the more I realized it was intentional. He had access he shouldn't have had, and he was using it to manipulate situations, planting misinformation in places that could easily be misconstrued. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just personal. It wasn't a random attack. Someone had engineered a scenario where I would look guilty while shifting blame away from themselves. Every misstep, every awkward glance, every whispered office rumor, it was all calculated. And Jason, intentionally or not, was at the center of it. Late one evening, when the office was mostly empty, I decided to check some of the shared project folders again. The hum of the air conditioner, the occasional creak of a chair, and the distant echo of a janitor pushing a cart made the office feel unusually tense, almost like a crime scene. I opened a folder labeled Q3 Client Proposals, and something caught my eye. A series of PDFs named in a way that didn't match any of the project files I had created. Curiosity piqued, I opened one. Inside were drafts of emails, carefully worded, almost identical to messages I had sent weeks earlier, but with subtle differences. Some contained slightly misleading language, phrases that could be twisted into suggesting incompetence or negligence. My stomach dropped. Jason had been studying my communication style, learning how I phrase things and crafting content to manipulate perception. I needed confirmation. I couldn't accuse someone without proof. So I began cross-referencing the metadata on these files. Every document had been accessed or modified using Jason's login. Every change occurred after hours. Every nuance, every misleading phrase, every subtle shift in wording, all traced back to him. The motive began to crystallize. Jason had been ambitious for years. I had always considered him a quiet, reliable colleague, but in reality, his career trajectory was stagnant compared to mine. I had just received a promotion to lead a high-profile client project, the very one that could open doors to bigger opportunities. He had been passed over, and resentment simmered quietly beneath the surface. It wasn't personal in the traditional sense. He wasn't angry about a conversation or a disagreement. He was angry about what I represented: success, visibility, and recognition. In his eyes, every step I took forward was one he had been denied. And rather than earn it through merit, he had chosen sabotage, carefully orchestrated, technologically savvy, and emotionally manipulative sabotage. Understanding this brought a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated that I had figured it out. Another part of me felt a hollow ache because someone I thought was harmless had nurtured this kind of malice. And yet another part burned with anger, not just for myself, but for the betrayal of trust, the subtle undermining of every colleague relationship I had worked so hard to build. I decided to dig deeper. If Jason's motive was envy and career ambition, there had to be more evidence in the digital trail. That evening, I stayed after hours once again. The office was dark, quiet, and the usual hum of activity had vanished. I accessed the network logs from the last few months, tracing access points to sensitive folders. And then I found it. A series of deleted files that had been removed just hours before the fake video surfaced online. I restored one of the files using backup software. My heart pounded as I opened it. There it was. A draft script of the video, labeled with a project name I recognized from a client meeting. The language was cruelly twisted, designed to make me look incompetent and aggressive. And the metadata? Jason's credentials. Every timestamp lined up perfectly with the timeline I had been reconstructing. The pieces clicked together. Jason hadn't acted impulsively. He had planned this meticulously. He had studied me, observed me, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. The fake video wasn't just about ruining my day. It was about sabotaging my career trajectory, ensuring that I would be discredited in front of clients and management, creating a space for him to step in and seize opportunities he had been denied. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling slightly as I leaned back in the chair. The realization was both empowering and terrifying. I now had the motive, the method, and the suspect. I knew why the video had been made, how it had been orchestrated, and what Jason had hoped to achieve. But motive alone wasn't enough. I needed to be strategic. Jason wasn't sloppy. He was careful. Confrontation required finesse. Acting too soon could destroy the trail I had painstakingly pieced together. Every log, every draft, every timestamp became a piece of ammunition I couldn't afford to waste. Over the next few days, I started observing not just Jason but everyone he interacted with. His behavior revealed subtle patterns: who he sought advice from, whose attention he craved, whose missteps he capitalized on. The deeper I looked, the more I realized that he had been manipulating perceptions across the office for months, maybe even years. He had used minor conflicts, whispered suggestions, and carefully timed actions to make himself appear helpful while quietly undermining others. One afternoon during a team meeting, I noticed him nudging a colleague with a subtle glance whenever a question was asked about a project I managed. He wasn't overtly interfering, but the look suggested influence, warning, or manipulation. I documented everything mentally, preparing a map of his behavior, motives, and potential next moves. At the same time, I began to notice changes in my own demeanor. I felt more vigilant, more calculated. My emotions were still raw: anger, hurt, and betrayal simmered just beneath the surface, but they were tempered by a clarity I hadn't felt before. Understanding the motive had given me a lens through which to see the office differently. Every interaction, every glance, every email could now be interpreted with a level of awareness that made me almost untouchable. Late that night, alone in the office, I pulled up a side-by-side comparison of the fake video and the original drafts I had recovered. The differences were subtle but intentional. The tone of certain words had been shifted. Phrases had been inserted that I would never have used. The expressions were almost identical to mine, but the context was twisted. Jason had relied on my habitual gestures, my voice patterns, and my communication style to make the video convincing. It wasn't just fabrication. It was manipulation. Psychological warfare executed with precision. I felt a strange mix of disgust and respect for the level of planning involved. Disgust for the betrayal, respect for the meticulousness. And above all, clarity. The motive was no longer an abstract theory. It was a clear roadmap of envy, ambition, and calculated malice. By the end of that week, I had compiled a detailed timeline, a dossier of digital evidence, and a behavioral analysis of Jason. The hidden motive behind the fake video was no longer hidden. It was stark, undeniable, and ready to be addressed. Understanding the why had transformed fear into strategy. The next steps would be decisive, measured, and informed by everything I had uncovered. Sitting back in my chair, staring at the glowing screen, I realized something important. The fake video wasn't just an attack on my career. It was an attempt to control perception, to manipulate reality, and to leverage envy into power. And now that I understood the motive, I knew I could dismantle it. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was no longer reacting, I was planning. I wasn't just a target anymore. I was an investigator, a strategist, and someone who had finally seen the full picture. The hidden motive had been revealed, and with it, a path to reclaiming control, confronting deception, and ultimately turning the tables. The war inside the office wasn't over, but I had a map now. And with that map, I knew I could navigate the treacherous terrain ahead. Every small observation, every recovered file, every behavioral nuance had led me here. Jason's envy, his calculated planning, and his ambition were all laid bare. Understanding the motive had given me power, and power was something I wasn't about to let him steal again. The morning sun spilled through the blinds in thin golden lines, and for the first time in months, I felt a strange mixture of calm and determination. I sat at my desk staring at the secure folder where I had compiled every piece of evidence: the emails, the server logs, the altered files, the timestamps, and of course the recreated drafts of the fake video. Everything Jason had done, every deliberate move, every whisper of betrayal had been documented. Today I was ready. I took a deep breath and let my hands hover over the keyboard. My office felt unusually quiet, almost serene, but I knew the tension lurking beneath the surface of the building. It was the kind of tension that made people pause mid-conversation, glance at the elevator doors a few extra seconds, and check their phones obsessively. I wasn't nervous, I was vigilant. Months of uncertainty, frustration, and fear had trained me for this exact moment. First, I decided to confront the internal channels. I drafted a concise, clear, and professional email to HR and my direct supervisor, detailing my findings. I included the evidence meticulously, explaining each step, each anomaly, each connection that pointed toward Jason's actions. I avoided embellishments, avoided emotional language, because I wanted the facts to speak louder than feelings. My pulse quickened as I hit send. Once the message left my inbox, there was no turning back. Almost immediately, I noticed subtle shifts around the office. Claire, the quiet coworker who had first warned me, gave me a fleeting nod of acknowledgement across the room. Others glanced at me with a mixture of curiosity and cautious interest. Word traveled quickly, as it always does in an office, but now the tone had shifted. Instead of whispers that suggested my incompetence, murmurs carried uncertainty about Jason's behavior. The tide was slowly turning. By mid-morning, HR requested a private meeting. I walked down the hall, heart steady but mind alert, carrying my laptop with the compiled evidence. Jason was not in the office yet, which was fortunate. I didn't want the confrontation to turn chaotic in front of others. As I entered the HR office, my supervisor and 2 HR representatives were already seated. I placed the laptop on the table and let the screen glow between us. "I've reviewed the digital records." I began, my voice calm but firm. "I've documented a pattern of activity that clearly shows unauthorized access to files and communications, and I have evidence that links these actions to a specific individual, Jason Thompson." There was a pause as the HR manager adjusted her glasses and leaned closer. "Emily, are you certain?" she asked. "I triple-checked everything," I replied, clicking through screenshots, metadata, and server logs. The timestamps, the logins, the draft files, they all point to the same person. And these actions directly correlate with the timeline of the fake video and the professional setbacks I experienced. They examined every piece carefully, taking notes and asking precise questions. I answered each one without hesitation, aware that composure now was as critical as the evidence itself. This was my moment, not for revenge, but for reclamation of truth and professional integrity. By late morning, a meeting had been scheduled that included Jason. I was instructed to wait outside while HR spoke with him first. The minutes stretched like hours. I leaned against the wall in the quiet hallway, listening for footsteps, murmurs, anything that indicated the conversation inside. When the HR representative finally called me in, Jason was seated, looking pale and stiff, a stark contrast to the casual, confident demeanor he usually carried. "Emily," one HR manager began, "Jason has been made aware of your findings. We want to hear from you directly, calmly, and clearly about what you've uncovered." I nodded, walked over, and stood near the table. For the first time in months, I saw the cracks in Jason's composed facade. His usual friendly smile was gone, replaced by a nervous tension that made his eyes dart from one person to another. "I have all the documentation," I said, laying out the folder, showing the unauthorized access, altered files, and evidence that directly link these actions to you. This includes the creation and distribution of the fake video that compromised my professional reputation. Jason swallowed hard and leaned back. For a moment, I saw a flicker of panic in his expression, a human vulnerability that hadn't been visible before. I didn't mean for it to get that far," he stammered. I thought it was just minor harmless edits." I shook my head slowly. "Minor edits that ruin someone's career aren't harmless. You knew the consequences and you acted anyway." The conversation grew tense but stayed professional. Jason tried to deflect, to rationalize, but every time he spoke, the evidence on the laptop spoke louder. Screenshots of logins, restored drafts of emails, and time-stamped access records left no room for ambiguity. HR asked pointed questions, requiring him to account for every action. The more he tried to justify, the more the inconsistencies became apparent. After nearly 2 hours of careful examination, HR concluded the formal meeting with a decision. Jason would be placed under investigation and removed from critical projects immediately. Any access to sensitive files would be revoked until the investigation concluded. While this wasn't instant justice, it was the first concrete step toward reclaiming my name and restoring my professional standing. Walking back to my office, I felt a strange mixture of relief and lingering adrenaline. I wasn't just relieved that action had been taken, I felt empowered. Months of fear, anxiety, and doubt had led to this moment. I had taken control, and the truth had been acknowledged. Later that afternoon, as I sat at my desk, I received a private message from Claire. "Well done. You did it. Proud of you." I smiled, realizing how small acts of solidarity had supported me through this ordeal. It wasn't just evidence and confrontation. It was community, awareness, and trust that had fueled this victory. As the day progressed, I began to notice subtle changes in the office environment. Colleagues who had once been cautious around me now approached with renewed respect. Conversations about projects were more collaborative, and the atmosphere, though still professional, carried a lighter tone. I realized that reclaiming my name wasn't just about proving Jason's guilt. It was about reestablishing trust in my own abilities and integrity. That evening, I stayed behind to finish some lingering tasks. The office was quiet, bathed in the soft amber glow of the setting sun. I took a moment to reflect, leaning back in my chair and letting the silence wash over me. Months ago, the fake video had made me feel powerless, stripped of reputation and control. Now, after evidence, confrontation, and meticulous strategy, I felt whole again. Not vindictive, not triumphant in a shallow sense, but balanced and clear-headed. I allowed myself a small indulgence, revisiting some of the initial messages, the subtle signs of betrayal I had ignored, the tiny moments of doubt and fear. Each one now felt like a stepping stone that had led to understanding and empowerment. It was strange to feel gratitude for hardship, but it was true. Without it, I wouldn't have discovered my own resilience, or the clarity needed to navigate treacherous waters. As the sun dipped below the skyline, I closed my laptop and took a deep breath. The day had been exhausting, emotionally charged, and cathartic. But most importantly, it marked a turning point. I had taken back my name, reclaimed my professional integrity, and regained control of my own narrative. In the days that followed, I noticed that the ripple effect of the day's events continued. Jason became more withdrawn, and his colleagues started noticing discrepancies in his behavior that they hadn't before. Some whispered about the investigation, others gave subtle nods of support when they saw me passing by. The office, once a place of quiet sabotage and suspicion, slowly began to feel like a space where accountability and professionalism prevailed. I also noticed how much this experience changed me personally. I was more vigilant, yes, but also more compassionate. I had seen firsthand how envy, ambition, and insecurity could drive someone to destructive actions. And while I had been hurt, I refused to carry resentment beyond what was necessary for justice. I had learned to balance assertiveness with patience, strategy with empathy, and determination with composure. One evening, while organizing some files, I found a folder I had forgotten to review, old project drafts that Jason had tried to manipulate months prior. I opened them and saw the subtle edits he had made, the slight shifts in tone meant to undermine me. I paused, then carefully restored the original files to their intended form. It felt symbolic, as if I were putting my work and my reputation back in its rightful place. That night, walking to my car with the crisp autumn air brushing my face, I felt a sense of closure unlike anything I had experienced before. The fear, anxiety, and doubt that had followed me for months were finally replaced by clarity, empowerment, and resilience. I realized that taking back my name wasn't just about exposing someone else's actions. It was about reclaiming my own power, my voice, and my dignity. Sitting in the driver's seat, I thought about the journey from that first horrifying morning when the fake video surfaced to this day, when my integrity had been recognized and my reputation restored. It had been a journey of quiet observation, careful strategy, and unyielding determination. And most of all, it had been a journey that reminded me of the strength I never knew I had until it was tested. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Not complacent, not naive, but at peace with the knowledge that I had faced betrayal head-on, gathered the truth, and stood firm. The name I carried, my reputation, and my sense of self-worth were intact, And no one could take that from me again. As I started the car and drove home, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, I realized the most important lesson of all. Truth and integrity are powerful weapons, but they require patience, courage, and meticulous care to wield effectively. I had taken back my name, not through anger, not through reckless confrontation, but through strategy, evidence, and unshakable resolve. And in doing so, I had rediscovered not just my professional standing, but my own resilience, confidence, and inner strength.